Okay, so I just wanted to bring some context of the circular economy dialogue as it pertains to packaging. I think we all realize that much of the discussions with solid waste issues involve very much a discussion on how to deal with packaging waste. So for those of you that may not be familiar with PackNext, we are an initiative of the Packaging Consortium, and we are a packaging neutral organization that is committed to finding solutions for all materials. So our vision is a world without packaging waste, and keeping in mind that we do believe in an integrated waste management approach where again, to reach our vision with a world without packaging waste, we try to avoid anything going to landfill. So we cover a range of member organizations very much similar to the Canadian Plastics Industry Association, where we have a range of stakeholders throughout the supply chain, part of our dialogue to make sure that we're working towards solutions towards a common goal. So just a kind of a feel for the knowledge in the room, how many of you feel very comfortable with the concept of a circular economy? Show of hands. So a good amount. Okay, so I won't go into too much detail, but just a kind of a quick background, as it is originated from the closed loop concepts back in the late 1970s around the industrial kind of ecology concepts. And of course, popularized by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, established in 2010. And of course, drawing into the sustainability dialogue of tying into the economy. So it's not just about the environment, but very much about the economy and a social equity perspective. So they describe or define circular economy as restorative, regenerative by design, and aims to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times. And of course, distinguishing between technical and biological cycles. So of course, looking at, in terms of packaging, so recycling cycles would be considered technical, and then composting would be considered biological. So, okay, so the next question, how many of you are very familiar with sustainable materials management? Roughly about the same, a little bit less, okay. So this term kind of came to light when the US EPA referred to it in their report in about 2011, describing it as the use and reuse of materials in the most productive and sustainable way across entire life cycles by minimizing the amount of materials involved and minimizing associated environmental impacts. So this is again taking a life cycle approach of the product and packaging life cycle. And of course, this concept has been recognized by the OECD as a policy approach, of course, to make a key contribution to growth, again, from all 3 points of sustainability, so social, economic, and environmental. So why do we bring this up in this first panel? And the discussions that I hear from our network is there a conflict of these two concepts? So some of the conflict of interest comes from some supporters of sustainable materials management can argue that the circular economy framework is solely focused on reuse, recycling, refurbishment, or product as a service. So in this case, if you're always focused on recycling, could, looking at this perspective, ignore some of the other potential environmental impacts? So if I'm working so hard to get something recycled, does it make sense logistically? Shipping materials in certain ways, it might not make sense from a life cycle perspective. So that's one argument. On the flip side, supporters of the circular economy framework might argue that sustainable materials management is not substantial in addressing the growing waste issue. And of course, we keep hearing the solid waste issue, the growing amount of plastics in the oceans, etc. So in the quick chart, you might see a quick breakdown of just looking at the overall goals, very, very high level, that the circular economy is focused on business and economic models to design waste out. And the sustainable materials management is looking at building policy frameworks to evaluate and support trade-offs. So in this, using the SMM framework, waste is multi-attributed. So the measurement tools, again, for the circular economy, it's more focused on the amount of time it can be product or packaging can be reused, the amount of recycled content. Whereas the SMM, you would think of a life cycle approach where you might look at greenhouse gas emission reductions, land, water use, etc. So there's a variety of indicators that might be used. Now, how our organization sees and what we're seeing, of course, throughout different kind of policies that are being introduced globally, is that it's very much a complementary framework, both circular economy and SMM. So SMM provides a current state analysis that evaluates impacts throughout the product and packaging life cycle. And the circular economy framework provides more of a forward-thinking vision to continually improve the recovery system. And of course, as packaging evolves and we're seeing new types of materials enter the marketplace, in order to eliminate the concept of waste, because we know that this issue of waste isn't going to go away anytime soon. So what does this mean? Let's take an example of our friendly multi-material laminate pouch. We know that laminate pouches are a growing sector in the packaging marketplace, and it has a lot of great environmental benefits. It's lightweight, creates great barrier properties, but is also comprised of multiple materials. So from a sustainable materials management point, we have many brand owners that will do a life cycle assessment saying, this package, when you compare to another package, has really great environmental benefits. So it will reduce the carbon footprint throughout its life cycle in comparison to the predecessor type package. But if you look at a circular economy approach and think of the future state, okay, so if we minimize our environmental impact as much as possible, our carbon footprint of this particular package, what's the next step? So how do we develop end markets that support the highest utility and value of this packaging? So again, keeping in mind that yes, we have energy from waste, for example, as a way to manage these type of packaging, because we know that recycling is not currently recyclable, so that's definitely an option. But the future state, how do we maintain that highest utility and value, keeping in mind that waste hierarchy? So this is kind of the approach from a circular economy framework, trying to eliminate the concept of waste. So how is this concept being applied, and what are we seeing in terms of policy? So here in Ontario, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act. So they state in the strategy that a circular economy aims to eliminate waste, not just from recycling processes, but throughout the life cycles of products and packaging. So a circular economy aims to maximize value and eliminate waste. So they have several components, as you can see from the diagram. But in this context, they talk, of course, about the life cycle. So it's almost like a hybrid of looking at, yes, we realize we need a low carbon approach, but still keeping in mind that we need to eliminate waste. And this similar concept of a hybrid approach is also being applied in Europe through the circular economy package, where again, they talk about the proposed actions will contribute to closing the loop of product life cycles through greater recycling and reuse and bring benefits for both the environment and the economy. And then furthermore, as you read further down in the middle paragraph, about fostering energy savings and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So from this perspective, again, I believe, and our approach is that these two concepts are complementary. So what's happening now in terms of ramping up this dialogue? How do we actually move towards a circular economy? And again, I think a lot of brand owners and a lot of different packaging producers are still just trying to understand how to optimize their packaging to reduce their environmental impact. So if you look further along in the 5-10 years from now, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation put out their goal of the new plastics economy, and this report has evolved over the past couple of years. Their most recent report issued early this year. So they've created this diagram of kind of what the end game might look like. So again, increasing reuse wherever possible and really trying to ramp up recycling to avoid kind of the leakage into the systems and cascaded recycling. What's really interesting about the report is specific to packaging and of course addressing plastic packaging as well. So they address about 30% of plastic packaging by weight, or more than 50% of plastic packaging by the number of items in the marketplace, requires fundamental redesign and innovation needed to really realize a circular economy. And they divide the packaging by 4 different categories. So by small format items, so this can be in form of sachets or small toiletries you might see at a hotel, to multi-material pouches or materials, as I mentioned before, the example of the pouch. Uncommon materials, so we're seeing new types of plastic resins that are entering the marketplace, new types of materials made from, I've seen paper made of ground up stone and mixed with a bunch of other types of materials. So there's some really interesting materials and packaging types coming out, but again, more work needs to be understand of how these types of materials can either be put into the right place and maybe, maybe curbside recycling isn't the right solution for those types of materials. And then again, nutrient contaminated packaging. So we see, again, even with the Ontario Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act, they're working on a food and organic waste plan. How do you deal with nutrient contaminated packaging? It should be separated to go into the plastic stream or again into the organic stream so they can be managed accordingly. So what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation did is a call for innovation, and this is global, and some of you might have heard that they've launched their innovation prize of $2 million, and again, really shooting for their what they call their innovation moonshots. And of course, innovation, yes, is a key role, and we also believe in much of the other kind of 5 building blocks that they've listed here. Of course, providing more information, creating a dialogue, and engaging stakeholders. And that's what we're really all about. So how do we tie this into kind of the trends of packaging, and why is it important to always keep the circular economy in mind as we're seeing new trends emerge? So I was actually just in Washington last week for a packaging conference in the US, and it's interesting to understand their dynamic and their kind of sustainability landscape. And some of the discussion they talked about was really about kind of the futurists and what are we thinking, 5, 10, 15 years from now. And they talked about the growth of e-commerce and how that will change. So right now we're seeing about a 13% or so of retail sales happening online. And it's rising relatively steady, but still is a small portion. But what does that mean for packaging? When we think about medical packaging, pharmaceutical packaging, I should say, so I suffer from allergies. I just picked up some allergy medication yesterday, and it's in a relatively big box and a small bottle inside. But that package is strictly for shelf presence. But when you have e-commerce packaging, that need for shelf presence is gone. So there's an extreme opportunity to optimize that package for shipping. But then again, if you're thinking about how things are evolving, we talk about packaging being shipped through drones. What would packaging for shipping through drones look like? What new materials would need to be incorporated to have barrier properties? And those are the unknowns that we have yet to anticipate for. And another interesting discussion was from a gentleman from Nestle Waters that was talking about some concerns about people asking for their water, 24-pack of water to be shipped. And what would that mean? Because from an environmental standpoint, that makes no sense. But what people are doing in like Toronto and very population dense neighborhoods, they don't have a car. They have to walk up flights of stairs. Why would I bother to buy it and walk up with it and say I don't believe in reusing a reusable water bottle? I could have someone ship it for me. And so those are some of the challenges that we arrive at as a packaging industry. How do we address these issues and meet the demands from consumers for cost and convenience? So again, understanding what these trends are, and then again, there was a new report that came out talking about developing a circular economy for novel materials. So as I mentioned, some new materials that we're seeing enter the marketplace or being explored to the current date, as well as the impact of printable electronics and the use of smart devices and the Internet of Things. Basically, we'll see more of that interaction with packaging. And so if there is printable electronics incorporated into packaging, how is that going to either, one, interrupt the recycling stream, or two, help facilitate recycling by informing consumers on how to manage their packaging at the end of its use? So it's also about risk avoidance. And so on the flip side of packaging, I've solely focused on the packaging waste side. Another initiative that I help to manage is our Pack Food initiative, which is looking at packaging solutions that help prevent food waste. And as we're seeing new technologies emerge, as I mentioned with smart packaging and electronics and new smart labels and temperature control devices that are helping to prevent food waste along the supply chain on their packaging, what does that mean for recycling, and what does that mean for the circular economy? And especially knowing that the value of packaging, I mean, if you eliminate the packaging, then you waste all the resources that's gone into making the product itself. So that is critical to note. And we know that food waste in itself has a very high environmental footprint in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. again, it's very much interconnected issues that we're dealing with when we're discussing the circular economy. So what does that mean for our organization and other organizations that we collaborate with? So how do we facilitate the circular economy dialogue in the packaging community? Again, we engage folks like CPIA and other and our universities and academic members to have a continued dialogue and discussion and how we can, of course, ramp up innovation, understand how we optimize our current recovery systems, how we inform and educate stakeholders throughout the supply chain. And again, it's about true collaboration. I know this will come up over and over again today, I'm very sure. But we've seen this kind of transactional behavior where we communicate with each other, but we're not really truly kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty and willing to compromise on certain issues so that we can better understand how we address the challenges to reach a common goal. And we also believe that not everything must go on curbside, and we know and we've seen over and over again that consumers just want the easiest way to discard their packaging. So the immediate reaction, kind of knee-jerk reaction is, let's just put it in the blue box and figure out how to deal with it. Well, are there other solutions that we can optimize? And so that's something that we're willing to explore further. And last but not least is, of course, with the changing mix of materials that are entering the marketplace, is addressing the evolving ton. I know Maria Keller presented last year about it, and some of you might be familiar about how the mix of materials entering the curbside collection has evolved considerably, and that creates kind of new packaging challenges for recycling. So how, as we as an organization, are addressing those issues and working with CPIA on specific plastic packaging concerns. So again, we have what we called our top 15 packaging challenges for MRF, which I presented last year. And I just wanted to provide an update that we are updating this document, looking at some of the challenges, trying to develop end markets for these materials, and looking for new ways to provide design guidelines around these types of complicated packaging. And of course, working again closely with CPIA. Black plastics, bottles on caps, labels on PET thermoforms or polystyrene packaging that are creating issues with the quality of that material. Coffee pods, etc. So these are all issues that we work on and we work towards our members to get feedback on, and again, work collaboratively to address these issues. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address any questions at the end of our panel. Thank you.